Hello everyone, this is Kurse here. I'm here with another tutorial video, this time on mixing, EQing and arranging. I got a question the other day from a guy called Max, and he basically asked me how to arrange, EQ and mix certain elements of your track. I didn't quite understand what he meant by arrange, but I'm assuming he means sort of making it as, I guess, compressed, like not compressed as in compression, but keep it all like tightened together and make it sound, good. So, without further ado, let's begin. The process of mixing relies heavily on EQing. EQing, I hope you know by now, is when you manipulate the frequency spectrum of a certain sound to either cut or boost certain frequencies. Over here you have the low end, and over here you have the high end. You dampen this, and you're just gonna the sound's gonna sound muffled. If you dampen this, then the sound's gonna sound like really lacking of the bass. Hope you understand that. So, it's really good practice to always have a collection of sounds rooted to something called a bus. This is a fairly advanced concept. Not a lot of people will do this. I'm going to color it though to make it a little bit more easy for you to understand. So what I've got these four sections. I've got a chord, saw bass, sub bass, and lead. And what's happening to them is that they are all rooted to something called the chord bus. It's just something that I've created. And it's rooted to this thing here. So what's happening here? So basically what happens is that whenever any of these make a sound, what happens is they immediately filter through into this thing here. So I'll show you, I'll demonstrate. Let me turn off everything, except these here. Okay, so you can see how it's making a waveform here. Watch if I turn it up, nothing will happen. Turn it off, nothing will happen. You do not hear anything because all the audio is routed straight to this thing here. What's the benefit? A lot of you may ask. Well, a benefit to me is that if you're ever wanting to combine an effect, such as a filter, or you want to compress the overall sound together, and you don't want to go through the hassle of going into each one, copying all the settings, then you route it to a bus. So you see here I've got a tape stop effect. So instead of me having to have an individual tape stop on every single one of these things here, it's just routed to here, so as soon as the tape stop is activated, it affects all these at the exact same time. Something else, there's also a side chain here, which makes it a little bit easier to keep a hold of. I think I've still got side chain on though. Yeah, I'll just leave it because I don't want to mess with anything just now. Anyway, as you can see here, none of these have an EQ apart from this one. So we're going to get onto the side of mixing and EQing. Another thing that's fairly good practice is to go to the presets option and go to this thing. It goes 20 Hz plus 18 kilohertz cut. What this is going to do is going to give you two really surgical cuts on both sides of the spectrum. And it's splitting the frequency. Now, this is really good practice because certain sounds need to have frequencies cut more than others. And this is the best way to do it. It's surgical, it's fast, it's quick, it doesn't leave any muddiness at the end. So just have one of these on all of the tracks that you wish to EQ. So it just saves you a bit of time. I've got compressor on here just because, compressors. Okay, cool. Right. So it's very important that you have a good set of headphones or monitors when you're doing mixing. Mixing is the process of having all the sounds blend together and make them sound as if they need to be together. So it's crucial that you have high quality gear to make sure that nothing's being left out, there's no extra muddiness, whatever. But it's not just about gear, it's also practice. Like, the more songs you do, the better you'll get at it. I'm not perfect, but I definitely understand the concept. So what I have with me right now are a pair of Audio-Technica ATH M50 headphones, not the X, just the M50s, and a pair of KRK Generation 3 Rocket 5 monitors. I'm going to be getting a sub bass in soon. The benefit of headphones are They are precise and they tell you exactly how loud the volume of something is, and it sort of dips into the frequencies. It's really good for panning. It gives you a clear indication of if there's too much bass, so they're quite useful. The monitors are essential. Monitors tell you exactly how your sound is going to sound through normal speaker systems. It doesn't color them, it just gives you the exact frequency you need. That's something you've got to be very careful with. If you've got any speakers that are colored, you need to get rid of them, because they're just going to make your sound, you're going to make your mix sound a lot better than it actually is, and then you're going to play it through like a car speaker and it's going to sound crap. So you need to get a decent pair of monitors with little or no colorization and a good bass range, or get a sub bass, which will clearly identify the sub bass, obvious stuff. So moving on to the actual EQ process. The chords that I've got here are not very high pitched. I mean, they're kind of high pitched, but they're sort of sitting around the mid end a lot. There's no bassy tone frequencies, but a lot of it is sitting around about here. So you'll see it again. Oh, whoops, I turned off the chord bus. There we go. You see that bit right there? Right, this is very important. Okay, it's really important, because you got to make sure you know where the frequencies are cutting. This is basically a clear indication of where you should really cut. Just use it as general practice. That's whenever the frequency is the thickest, it's probably where you should cut, as in for certain instruments. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting off all the bass end, and a lot of you may be confused as to why I'm doing this, but something happens to your track. When there's too much bass in your track, you get something called muddiness. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced it. You've listened to it through your headphones and you're like, oh, this sounds really good. And then you stick it into your iPod and you listen to it and you're like, this is crap. I can barely make out anything. And then you turn up the high end and it just gets really screechy and painful. So it's like a sliding slope. You're not going to get anywhere. So you need to be very careful when you're working with the bass end. So what we're doing is we're cutting off this mud and making it all clear so that none escapes. There's nothing here. And if you're listening to headphones, you can probably notice the difference. Is that I've probably saved quite a lot of mud here. There's a little bit slipping through. So if any rogue frequencies do get through, they're going to get cut immediately by this EQ. Second of all, the high end, I can hear a few of you going, no, why would you do that? Why would you make it damp? And why would you not want to make it all bright and nice and fuzzy? Well, basically, too much bright makes your head explode. It hurts your ears and it will just sound terrible in the final mix. So you want to just take this down just a little bit, because white noise, your rogue frequency white noise usually sits around about the 18K mark. So you kind of want to tighten it up to about 14-ish K. So you're still getting that nice bright end, but it's not like coming through too much. So that's basically a chord. That's the basics of that chord. I always have this EQ to start off with, and then if there's any like slight changes I want to make, I will probably mess around with the mid. The mid's very important to get quite precise. Something else that's really good practice is that the mid frequency range is really tricky. It's probably the hardest part, because it's that awkward position between too damn high and too damn low. So you got to try and find a good cut for it. And it's not a surgical cut, it's like a tiny little bend as well. Usually people bend around about the 300 to 400 hertz mark, just a little bit. Maybe they boost a little bit up there. It's such a tricky frequency spectrum to get a hold of. It is like, it is the worst. The mid-range. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Next, onto the saw bass. Saw bass is also kind of tricky because it's low and it's supposed to have power, but the power's lacking for some reason. There's some slight phasing going on there, and I can't seem to figure out how to stop it. I'm still kind of new to Silent One. Okay, weird. Okay, yeah, the saw bass range. Saw bass is a little bit tricky again. So we're not going to cut nearly as much as we did with the chord, because the saw bass is, as it sounds, a bass. But this little bit right here, this is quite a dangerous range, because if you have it too low, you're cutting into the territory where the sub bass is going to sit. If you cut it too high, you're just going to lose all your power. So this is sort of the punch range. This is where you actually feel hear the bass. You don't exactly feel it, you just sort of hear it. So I'm going to check this. Yeah, I'll cut it at about 50 odd hertz. So you can sort of hear it. If you're wearing headphones, you can kind of hear it very, very gently. Yeah, and you want to cut the high end so there's not too much nasty coming through. Yeah, so you got to be careful with this bass. I'm probably going to go back and sort that out. That's quite weird. The sub bass. Okay, you should all understand, because if you watch my tutorials, you'll know how much I rant about the sub bass. The sub bass and the kick are the two lowest frequencies in your mix. There is no exception. Never, ever, 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 ever are you going to have a frequency lower than the sub bass. So you've got to make the decision in your track whether your kick is going to be of a lower frequency than your sub bass. And it's quite tricky, because depending on the track, if your track has a lot of drums in them, it's probably a smarter move to have your sub sitting on top of your drums. And for this instance, I believe I will. I do, yeah, because there's a lot of drums going on there, and it's probably just a smart thing to do. There's a lot of drums throughout the whole thing, actually. A lot of bassy drums, but if it's not so like bassy drums, if it's dubstep, then you have your sub that's further down the frequency range than your kick drum, because the kick just sort of sits on top, and that's always how it's been done. But in this one, I believe the kick is going to go further than the sub bass, so I'm going to push that down here. So the sub bass, the lowest frequency in your mix, it should just be a sine wave or a soft square wave. This is what it sounds like. Can you hear it? Because if you can, it should be very faint. The sub bass is something that I like to say should be felt and not heard. You should never really be able to say, I can hear that sub bass, because it's not right. That's what the saw bass is there for. The saw bass is sort of like that counterpart for the sub bass, like the chord and lead are sort of counterpart, where the chord is the bit in the middle and the lead is the thing that sits on top. The sub is the bass and the saw is the middle and high range, retrospectively. It's not actually mid and high range. So the sub is going to sit at about 30 odd hertz, maybe not. I'll put it at about 25, not 27, because it spends a lot of time up there. Put it there. Right, and this thing here, this high, you're gonna low pass it. So No high frequencies. Okay, it should really be sitting about there. And there's also these things here called stereo separation knobs. If you've got your track set up like I do, which is where you've got the view set to wide tracks, then you'll see these little knobs here that say stereo separation. And it's not like panning, it's like if you listen to the saw bass, for instance, you can hear it on both sides of your headphones. Now, like this. It sounds very monotonous and kind of straight down the middle. And if you go like this, it's going to seriously come from both sides. It's actually going to feel a little bit like it's actually coming from behind you. It's good practice, or it's not good practice, it is written, and it is law, and I decree, and every other engineer and sound techie decrees that you never pan your basses. And you, sorry, not pan. Well, don't pan your basses, and don't stereo widen your image. Stereo widen your bass. Stereo narrow, or whatever the word is. So that means that turning all this over to something like mono, this is mono, this is stereo. Turning over to mono is going to keep it straight down the middle, and it's not going to interfere or jump around in your mix, giving you a little bit more space. That's something else that's very important, is space, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So we've done the sub, now moving on to the lead. Now I just added the lead as a necessity. It's not exactly needed, but it's pretty handy to have. Straight off the bat, you can hear that it's kind of dipping into that low mid frequency. I think it's actually going into the bass a little bit. Yeah, thought as much. So we're going to cut that, like really cut it. This is really impressive, and there's actually a little bit of phasing in there, which is quite strange. But this is where I'm talking about the chord and the lead need to sort of work together. So here is the chord, and here is the lead. They look a little bit similar, but you can see there's actually a bit more on the chord than there is the lead. I'm going to take this lead back a little bit more. I can also see up here, there's actually this sort of space here. That's the rogue frequencies getting through, so we're going to low pass that as well. Very important stuff. Now, let's listen to it all together. Okay, it sounds alright. Sounds beautiful. Now over onto the chord bus, we're also going to have another... Well, actually, maybe it's not necessary. Maybe it's not entirely necessary, but if you want, just to be on the safe side, to make sure that nothing is like going absolutely crazy in the middle section, you can actually EQ it all as a single thing. Beautiful. Something else you see here, this is panning the sound. What panning is, well, I'll show you. Here's the lead. strange. Sorry, I just got a little problem with my headphones. Doesn't matter. So I think you could tell what panning does. The best way to think of panning, or when to use panning, is not as an effect. Panning is actually really important. So your mix is like a pancake. I'm trying to think the best I can. If you don't have panning, basically what you've got is a really, really, really skinny and narrow pancake. But what you've got to do instead is you've got to fill out the song entirely. So imagine this pancake is about 10 centimeters in diameter. So you've got a flat, straight pancake. However, when you turn up the lead on the right-hand side, or left-hand side, depending on what your headphones are doing, you're actually increasing the left/right-hand side of that pancake by a little bit. And you actually have to do this for all of your, well, a lot of your instruments, apart from your basses and sometimes your drums, where you have to actually fill out this pancake to the size it possibly goes. And stereo separation is also the same idea. Again, like a pancake. If you enhance the stereo separation, what you're effectively doing is that you are getting rid of all the stuff that's in the middle of the pancake and sort of pushing it out the way. So you're giving the middle more space to breathe. And the middle is where your bass sits. So you need to give your bass enough space. You can't have leads and stuff like that just sitting down the middle, otherwise you're going to muddy it up. So if you have some higher synths or arps and stuff on the left or right hand side of the pancake, chord that is sort of hitting just in front of those sides of the pancake, about 4 centimeters in, with about a 2 centimeter gap down the middle for the bass to sit in, then you have a perfectly spread out pancake. You've got the best pancake you can possibly have. I don't know why I am using pancakes as some sort of descriptive sense, but you know, fuck it, I'm going crazy. So mixing 101. That's really the important part when it comes to mixing and mastering and EQing, stuff like that. Not mastering, mixing and EQing. I really hope that that helped. It's really difficult explaining mixing to a lot of people. It's a simple concept, it's just very difficult to put down in words. So I really hope that this helped you guys, and I'll see you guys later.